Hello again. Thank you for your patience. We'll start now. So again, my name is Mark Leeper. I'm a sales engineer at MicroStrategy. Welcome to this second webcast in the MicroStrategy 10 series. In this webcast, we'll be exploring advanced analytics. The webinar is actually in two parts. First of all, we'll look at the data mining capabilities of MicroStrategy, so those advanced analytics. And we'll have a look at, in more detail, at the R integration. And I'll explain what the R project is. And then we'll have a look at advanced visualizations using the open source D3 library. There'll be three demonstrations, so I'll demonstrate the R integration. I'll demonstrate how we bring in a D3 visualization, and then the third demonstration will be a combination of both. So why do organizations do advanced analytics? So the quote here from the Harvard Business Review is based on some research done at MIT, and it really highlights that applying analytics puts you ahead of the competition with increased productivity and profitability. There's a spectrum of advanced analytical techniques. Their application ranges from descriptive to predictive and prescriptive. For example, we could use association rules as a technique to describe the affinity between items in transactions, shopping transactions, in order to do market basket analysis. Or we could predict campaign responders using a decision tree classification predictive model. The MicroStrategy analytic map has three areas, so we'll focus on each of these. First of all, we have the functions library of MicroStrategy. There are over 300 functions, scores of which are quantitative in nature. The data mining services provide native data mining capabilities of MicroStrategy. Here the screenshot shows what's called an eye chart in a decision tree, which, as I said earlier, could be used in campaign management. And then we have the R analytics capability and the integration. So quickly looking at these in turn, this one is a bit of an eye chart. It basically lists some of the functions within the function library and groups those into categories. So we can see here that we've got statistical functions, financial functions, and data mining functions, amongst others. The MicroStrategy data mining suite has a number of techniques. The more commonly used techniques, such as association rules, again mentioned earlier under the market basket analysis example. So those techniques on the left can be used to train and score models. And those predictive metrics that we create using MicroStrategy are deployed just like any other metric within the application. The native capabilities can then be extended using the R integration pack. So what is R? R is a language and environment for statistical computing and graphics. It's the #1 choice for data scientists. It currently has over 500 packages, and there are literally millions of practitioners. There's a vibrant user community around the R package, otherwise known as the R project. So the MicroStrategy R integration pack. The integration is in 3 simple steps. First of all, we need an R script. That can be from the R library, or you can write your own. MicroStrategy supports any R metric, so any R calculation, no matter how sophisticated, can be deployed within MicroStrategy. And again, we deploy that just like any organic metric created natively in MicroStrategy. Once we have the R script, we capture what's called its signature. So those are essentially its inputs and outputs, the parameters that govern it. And then we deploy that as a metric. So once we have the R script and its signature captured, an end user can then deploy those as metrics. Now, the current version 2 of the R integration pack has 12 off-the-shelf scripts, which means that we can go straight to step 3 and simply deploy those as metrics. And I'll point you to where you can find the integration pack later. So let's take a look at the advantages of the MicroStrategy approach. So first of all, as I said, the R metrics are usable across the MicroStrategy environment, just like any other metric. One R analytic can have multiple outputs, be applied in multiple applications and reused. And they're what's called standalone rather than inline scripts. Again, I'll expand on that in a second. We can then build flexible applications using techniques such as MicroStrategy prompts, change the parameters at execution time, and make use of MicroStrategy transaction services to build an application. And the R environment is transparent. So in a little bit more detail, again, the R analytic can be used across the platform. So whether that's the standalone MicroStrategy desktop client for conducting visual insight, on MicroStrategy web or mobile, on-premise or using the cloud. So one particular analytic can be used across multiple applications. So for example, the gold standard for forecasting is the ARIMA analytic. And that could be applied to numerous metrics, such as profit, revenue, cost. The same clustering analytic could be used to cluster your stores, your employees, customers, products. The fact we have standalone rather than inline scripts means that we maintain the scripts in one place, whilst abstracting the complexity from the end user. Again, this is a MicroStrategy theme, the fact that we emphasize reuse to lower the maintenance. The applications are flexible, so with parameters. So for example, supposing I have a forecasting scenario, as an end user, I don't know at the outset maybe what confidence levels to set. For example, maybe I want to set an 80% confidence level. Well, we have the ability to define these parameters at metric execution time. So you can have a single metric that's very flexible. And with prompts, we can ask the user at runtime again to choose a metric to forecast. With transaction services, with an application, we could, for example, have the situation where a customer comes into a car showroom, we enter attribute values, and we predict what car is likely to be bought by that customer. One important point, I think, is the fact that the R environment is transparent to MicroStrategy. It actually runs on the same server as the intelligence server of MicroStrategy. The fact that it isn't on a separate server means we don't have further hardware requirements, and it limits any security concerns regarding passing data to a separate server, as well as the performance implications associated with that. The analytic models don't simply disappear into the stratosphere once they run. We have read-write access to the R environment, to the data files and the graphics. What that means is that as an end user, if you discover some insight using an R analytic, files are generated on the intelligence server, they're not lost. Those files may then be sent off to a data scientist to validate the insights, because of course you may be using that to make a strategic decision. So with that, let's have a look at the first of our three demonstrations. So here we're in MicroStrategy Desktop, and to start with I'm simply going to add some data, and I've actually got some car data, some used car information in this car data spreadsheet. So if we preview that and go to the new data wrangling option, which you would have seen in the first webcast, we can see that we have the price of the car, the mileage, the cylinder, litres, cruise, sound, leather, the vehicle ID, so the vehicle itself, and then we have this final column in the data is the make and the type. We can see these are American cars, so we've got Buick sedan. We'll also have Chevrolet convertibles, etc. But let's say I want to actually independently analyze the make and the type in my model. So what I'd like to do is split this field into two. So we have a function to do that within data wrangling. We can just split on a separator, and in this case we'll use white space as the separator and apply that. And then I can rename these fields make and type. Confirm that. And we're going to use these as metrics in our model. now we have our data. We could then plot this perhaps as a bar chart, looking at the prices of the vehicles. So let's bring price and split by vehicle. But now, of course, we want to predict the price. So we can create a metric. Let's call this predicted price. And we have an R script provided to us. If we copy that and paste that in, this is actually based on one of the 12 off-the-shelf R scripts from the R integration pack. It's an example of a stepwise regression method. So we can see that we've actually got a number of the factors already in the set of parameters. But this factors term here, we've been told by our data scientist, means that we can add other factors in there. So in our case, we want to add the make and the type to these factors. So simple case of putting those in, make, type, on the input names, and the parameters to the calculation. I can then validate that and save it. So now we have the predicted price, which we can bring into the visualization. And we can break by the metric and color by those metric names. And if we look at the predicted price, we could change the shape of that to a tick. Now we can see that we've got a price and a predicted price based on our model. So I've just added a new visualization, because what I'd like to look at now is how good this model is. We can see obviously there's some variance between the predicted price and the actual price. But what is that residual, whether it's positive or negative? So let's plot that residual against the predicted price as a scatter. Let's bring the second visualization below the first one. Choose the type that we want, in this case the scatter plot, a bubble chart. And let's calculate the difference between this predicted price and the actual price, and call that the residual. So that with a quick calculation there, renaming it residual, we can then create a standard plot breaking for each vehicle, plotting the residual against the predicted price. So we just think about what we've got now. We've got a residual which could be, of course, positive or negative. But we would expect, with a good model, that this would be fairly symmetrical around 0. So let's highlight that axis. So the residual metric, we can add a reference line, a constant of 0, just to highlight where that is. So as we move from left to right on the predicted price, we shouldn't have any asymmetry. In other words, the predicted price shouldn't give us any insight into what the residual value is. And we can see that it is fairly symmetrical, up to about 50,000 to the right-hand side there. And this indicates that there's some factor that the model isn't taking into account. Now, with other tools, other data mining tools, it may be quite tricky to follow the train of thought and provide colour to the insight here. Start to examine why this is and what the factors are. So, for example, I'd start to be asking myself, well, what are these expensive cars? What's the make? What's the type of car? Now, with MicroStrategy, it's straightforward to colour these charts. I can bring the make and the type into the colour by. And by doing that, I can see straight away that actually they're all Cadillac convertibles. Okay. So what this is telling us is that there's something which, the interaction of the Cadillac with the convertible is giving some sort of amplification here. So it's not just the make factor and the type factor that it's a Cadillac and it's a convertible. It's the interaction of those two. So what we'd like to do is create an interaction term, add the make and the type back together, and iterate our model with that new interaction term. So to do that, we can add a new metric here. We'll call it interaction, and we can use a function. So we concatenate with a blank space using our concat blank function the make and the type. So we have that new metric, and now we can change our predicted price, our analytic, to take that into account, and again document that by including it in the input names so that our data scientists later can see that documented. Validate that and save it, and now we've changed that metric. The graph dynamically updates and we can see we've got a much better model fitting the data. We can maximize that and see what we've achieved. So that's an example of an R script being used, creating a model and the ability of Visual Insight to add analytical capability and add color to that. So let's go back to the slides. So we have on the screen now a number of URLs for you. These webcasts will be recorded, so you can replay this on demand, but you'll be able to find the URLs quite simply. This is the link for the R integration pack, and I'd also encourage you to not only take a look at that, but play some of the previously recorded webcasts on R integration that you can see on the right there. So there's injecting analytics from R, made easy, and then the part 2 for that, advanced self-service with R analytics. Okay, let's have a look now at D3 visualizations. And why visualize data at all? What's the difference between raw data, as seen here in a grid, and visualizing data? Well, again, it provides insight to us. If we take a look at the same information graphically, it's quite clear that one city of these list of cities stands out. That's New York at the top on this horizontal stacked bar chart. And we can also see that the web is the highest contributor there. Why have additional visualizations from those that are provided from the standard ones? Well, certain visualizations may provide better insights into that data. It increases the visualization possibilities. Different use cases a line chart can look different from this. The middle of the three screenshots there is a calendar of 3 years and a day, each day within each year plotted. And may have a particular use. For example, you may be looking at absenteeism. These visualizations integrate seamlessly with MicroStrategy, and they also make the analysis fun to have dynamic visualizations updating as you change filters. What are D3 visualizations then? So the term D3 comes from the fact that they are data-driven documents, so the 3 Ds of data-driven documents. It's essentially a JavaScript library for creating visualizations, interactive dynamic visualizations. There are other JavaScript libraries out there. D3 is an open source library. There are commercial libraries such as HighCharts as well that can be used and integrated with MicroStrategy. It utilizes industry standards, so HTML5. If you go to the D3 website, so the first URL presented here, the second URL is the MicroStrategy set of D3 visualizations that we've allowed, currently documented for you to deploy. So please take a look at those as well. So you can use existing visualizations and bring those into MicroStrategy. So whether it's a box plot or a bubble chart, or the one on the lower left, circle packing, which you might find presents a tree structure in a better way than the more usual heat map or tree map visualization. And then we have the calendar view on the top right. So again, different visualizations may have different uses. It may be the same data. So here we've got the Google graph, so the timeline graph, but also the D3 calendar presenting daily data. The timeline graph clearly shows trends. We can change the window of time that it operates over quite flexibly within the visualization itself. The Google calendar presents every day and may be easier to pick out year-on-year differences and seasonality. So let's take a look at the second demonstration. So if I share that with you. So here again we're in MicroStrategy Desktop in this case, and we're just going to bring a file in to provide a data set to work with. And this data here, if we preview that, we can see that we've simply got by date, city and channel, we've got revenue and cost figures. So let's look at that in Visual Insight. Let's pick one of the out-of-the-box visualizations. So it seems like a good idea to maybe look at a line chart. Let's look at the trend of by date of the revenue. So we can just drag those into the visualization. We can see that trend. Okay, now we can save this, and we'll come back to this dashboard. So that's the D3 Viz. Close the desktop down. Now what we'd like to do is incorporate some of the visualizations from D3 and the Google timeline that we published and documented on the developer zone. So we can see those on the left hand side, and I'll show you how simple it is to add those into the plugins folder of the desktop. It's a similar process to bring these into MicroStrategy Web, by the way. So if I open up the desktop folder and the code and plugins folder within that, we can see that's currently empty. So if I copy over some of these folders, the bubble chart, the calendar, and the Google timeline, copy and paste. Now when I launch desktop again, those are now available to me. Close the tutorial. So let's open up the dashboard we saved earlier. And we can see on the lower right here that we have 3 new visualizations below the network one. So this is the bubble chart. We click on the calendar. We see each day now presented within the year and the months within that year. We can, of course, change the metric. We could create a calculation, so a metric for profit, revenue minus cost. Let's rename that profit. Now let's switch the visualization to a Google timeline. So as I hover over a value, on the top right of the visualization it shows me a tooltip. At the bottom of the visualization is a time window which I can expand and collapse. And at the top left of that visualization I can zoom to a particular window. So this, if you're used to following stocks and shares, this will be familiar to you. Let's bring in profit. Again, visualization updates. Let's change the window and zoom in to 1 month, 3 months, and see the interaction of that visualization. Now let's add a new sheet and look at the bubble visualization. So this one is a bit more fun. If we have a look at profit by city and channel, we can add filters in and see the visualization update dynamically as we add in date selections from and to. Again, I'm not too sure how valuable this is. I think personally I'd prefer a heat map, but it does add a lot of color and maybe part of the one of the examples of a fun visualization. Okay, so going back to the slides. So I just want to introduce the last demonstration. The situation is we've got an organization of, it's a retail organization with hundreds of stores, about 1,400 stores, and we want to do some performance management on those stores. We're looking at obviously key metrics such as revenue, but prior to using a standard metric like revenue to look at the performance of our managers of these stores, perhaps we want to cluster the stores. because not all stores are created equal, so to speak. We want a fair peer comparison of these stores. So we have store demographics, and we want to use those demographics to cluster the stores and visualize those clusters. We know how old the store is, the store age. We know the store square footage. We know how many local competitors there are of that type of store within a geographic radius. We know the median income within that same geographic radius and the population. So we can use these metrics to cluster those. And again, we'll be using a standard R analytic, one of those from the dozen in the R integration pack version 2 to do that. So, I'll share that with you. So if I open a data set here in this dashboard, we can see the stores that we have in this grid. So we have stores in cities in the US in this case. Again, we know the store age, square foot, etc. We want to use these metrics to cluster the stores. So we're going to add in a new metric to that visualization. So we'll create a metric. This will be our cluster. And the R script that we have is using the clustering technique, k-medioids clustering. And we can see that it requires a number of variables. And of course we know what those are. Those are the metrics on the left hand side of the R script. So let's replace that with those metrics, starting with competitors. Median income, population, store age, store square foot. Validate and save that. So now we can see in the grid that we have a cluster assigned. We're creating 4 clusters based on the parameters of that R script. Obviously that could be changed. But we have 4 clusters and each store is now assigned to one of those 4 clusters. But we now need to get some insight into, what means that what makes a store cluster 1 rather than cluster 4, etc. So let's add a sheet to this dashboard and plot the stores based on 2 of these metrics. Let's look at the stores in a scatter plot. Let's look at break down the stores by median income in the vertical and population in the horizontal. Okay, so that shows the distribution of our stores, but now we can colour that based on the cluster that we've just found and give those colours. So rather than the default thresholds there of this blue range, let's switch it to a red, orange, green. We only have 4 clusters, so let's base this on value. remove the central one, so we have 4. Let's delete that. Let's change the colour of the first one, perhaps. Let's make that blue. Make this tan one here red. And apply that. So now we can see that the fourth cluster, the green one, is where we have higher population but lower median income. So this higher population density, these could be inner city areas. The third cluster, the red cluster, is where we have higher median income and lower population. So these could be the suburbs. This visualization, that scatter plot, isn't differentiating between clusters 1 and 2, the blue and the orange. Forgive me if you're colorblind with this example, but 1 and 2 are not being separated with that. Now, of course, this is just two-dimensional. We're just looking at one metric against another, but we have 5 metrics. So we'd actually want to create maybe 10 visualizations. So let's just see what that process would be. We could, of course, duplicate this and change the metrics. But as you can guess, we're going to use a D3 visualization to plot them all in a second. So duplicating that means we could now replace, let's bring store age into the horizontal instead of population. So dragging and dropping that on there replaces it. Store square foot in the vertical. And now we can see that the blue stores, cluster 1, are the younger stores in terms of store age. Okay, but if we go back to the first sheet, the grid here, what we've brought in is a D3 scatter plot matrix. And by clicking on this one and choosing that visualization, we then immediately see each metric plotted against each other metric as a matrix of metrics in one hit. So we've reduced our analytic time to insight and reduced the development of that just by using a D3 scatter plot. So we see everything in one hit. So that's brought together the R integration to create our clusters in the first place, and we're using a D3 visualization to see that. So again, quickly, as we're running out of time, we've got 5 minutes left here or so. Let's just look at again some additional resources on the D3 side. So I alluded to the fact there's a visualization SDK. We use that to bring in certain visualizations from the D3 library. You'll find that on the developer zone for MicroStrategy. And there's a visualization builder tool, and it documents step by step how you will use that to bring your visualization into MicroStrategy. We'll have some time for questions and answers. We'll take a couple of questions. As you're thinking about those questions, I just want to point out and leave this on the screen as we go through that we actually have a future webcast coming up. You should be receiving emails soon. This one is titled Evolving Mobile Analytics through MicroStrategy 10, and that's presented by my colleague Matt Pepper, and that's on August the 20th, same time, 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. Also, we're running throughout August this year, every Friday we're running a workshop where you can get your hands on MicroStrategy 10 called Enterprise Data Discovery Workshops. So please join us. The first one is tomorrow, which I'm running in fact. So for those of you that are on this call, and if you're coming tomorrow, look forward to meeting you then. It's in our Chiswick office. As I said, there will be time between 10 and 1 to get your hands on MicroStrategy 10, running through some worked examples with my support. So I can see in the chat that someone would like to go back to one of the URLs that I presented earlier. Let me bring up the R integration pack. So this is the URL for the R integration pack. It's worth pointing out that if I click the R script shelf for the what's called ready to go R analytics, we can see the dozen R scripts on this shelf, and they're all documented, from seasonal forecasting to ARIMA, clustering. Also notice that R scripts can be deployed via URL, so you don't even need the file, the R script file on the intelligence server. So if you've got some pushback from IT saying we don't want to actually put a file on the server, they can all be driven from a URL. So here you can see that we're using Amazon AWS to call the K-Medioids clustering R analytic that we use in one of the demonstrations. Just while I'm here, I've actually opened up the webcasts. These are the on-demand webcasts, the two that I pointed out earlier. So I'd certainly recommend these. They go into a little bit more detail on R integration, and will be a refresher to some extent on what MicroStrategy can do in data mining. If we have a look at the D3 home site, this is the home site here. A plethora of visualization techniques that you can employ in your dashboards. We can see the bubble chart here. And in fact, that's the scatter plot matrix that we made use of for the clustering example. The set of D3 visualizations that we brought into the visualizations plugins area of the community page here is documented. So again, please make use of these. There's a dozen of those. A number of those we use today, including this one here, the Google timeline, remember. This has changed slightly from the screenshot that I took, but this is the developer zone, looking at the visualization SDK. If we go into the documentation of that, that documents how to create a HTML5 visualization. And again, there's step-by-step examples of how to bring in a D3 visualization into MicroStrategy. Often learning by example is a good technique. So the documentation will provide that for you. So with 1 minute to go or so, I think looking at the questions again. Yep, I think we're good to go. So again, please register for any of the Friday, August workshops. And again, I look forward to seeing anyone who is coming tomorrow morning. Okay, thank you.